because on Thursday, the Prime Minister, she made an edict, you say, or she told us that she wants money, and so there will be a penalty on persons with dark tinted windows, car
Ye-
windows, because
Yes.
as a preventative measure in fighting crime. And
Yes.
I mean, people were like, "Oh my God!" What I went and was looking up the cost of this and how it's going to affect people, and so I don't know. I mean, for me, I wasn't thinking of the legality of it or
Yes.
anything. I just thought she said it, and I think the average Barbadian is going to think that she said it, right, Dr. Ferdinand, and that is what it is. The average person did not think that there was an issue, but here comes Mr. Thorne. And I know we talk about Verla de Pisa in that press brief, public
Mhm.
brief. But
Mhm.
by when you started out and you opened up your mouth, my goodness, the whole thing was crap. It just fell down. The whole thing fell down for me, because here it was. When you open your mouth, it felt like, it's like a father standing with a hand out and say, you can't touch these children here. It's not going to work. It's almost like you were doing that. Can you walk us through that process? So you heard the prime minister said what she said, and what was going in your mind that led
Well,
up to you making that statement.
yes, the first thing that struck me, people must have felt traumatized. I mean, a finance minister saying, "I want money," it's, it's the last thing you want to hear on a Thursday evening, the day before you go to the supermarket. And so that my reaction is that request justified? In law, it was not. And if you will permit me, Marcia, Ferdy, and Kimar, to justify what I'm saying, um, obviously she referred to this window tinting business, the question of people tinting their windows, and if your car window is too dark, she will she will fine you. I mean, that was so legally flawed that I was aghast, really, that a prime minister who is supposed to have access to the best legal advice would say something like that. Um, so that the first thing that struck me was how traumatized people must be, because you occupy high office, and when you occupy high office, you must occupy that office responsibly, and you must say things that are not only proprietous, but you must say things that are lawful. And as I said, the prime minister's request was unlawful. Now, let me come to the law, and at risk that it is boring. I always warn you that a discussion on the law can be sometimes boring, but I must do this.
Yes.
Now, it's a section of the road traffic regulations, and this is where the prime minister would have been rooting, would have been locating her requests for this money. I want money. And she's saying, I want this money because the tint on your windows is too dark. And the Road Traffic Act and the road traffic regulations prohibit persons from having uh, tint on their windows that is too dark. Let us put it as plainly as that. It prohibits that. But that, I want to say to Barbadians, that prohibition is not a road traffic offense. And I think Verla may have touched on this on our press, our media, our public briefing on Saturday, when I think Verla used the word that the act, the regulations themselves are unsatisfactory. I think I remember hearing Verla say that, and she's right. But I go farther than that. What the prime minister, if you're going to fine somebody, the basis of that fine is that they've committed an offense. What is mentioned in the road traffic regulations is not an offense. And I'm going to give the Prime Minister some free legal advice. Uh, I brought it home with me, uh, and I'm going to share this with you and the Prime Minister of this country. Uh, if anybody wishes to take notes, Regulation 20, Sub Regulation 7. I don't like to do this, but anybody, a lawyer, person who wants to find the road traffic regulations 1984, please go to Regulation 20, sub-regulation 7. I'm going to read it, Marcia.
Yes.
Please endure this. The glass, all windscreens and all windows on the outside of every motor vehicle shall be made of safety glass, and the owner of the vehicle shall not permit the glass to be tinted to such a degree as to make the driver of the vehicle unidentifiable from a reasonable distance by a person outside the vehicle. I can summarize that. What they're saying, the owners of vehicles should not tint the glass too dark. Now, is that an offense? I say no, it is not an offense. Um, in law, there are rules that are called mandatory rules, and there are rules that are called directory rules. A mandatory rule is something that you must do or must not do. It is mandatory. Yes, you're following me, Marcia?
Yes, yes, definitely. Making notes.
Good. Good. A mandatory rule, if you breach a mandatory rule, well, let me bring it to the tinted windows. That rule that I just read that says that you should not tint your windows too dark. The question is that a mandatory rule? In other words, must you obey that? And if you refuse to obey it, you cannot use your car. Or is it a directory rule? A directory rule, if you breach a directory rule, it does not prevent you from using the car. In other words, it is just somebody advising, directing, suggesting, to use layman's language, suggesting that you don't darken your windows too excessively. A mandatory rule would be if you do it, you
Mhm.
can't use the car.
Right.
Directory rule, if you do it, well, we just want you to do it. We're just asking that you do it. The police service, the police department, they have not charged anybody for this. And the reason they have not charged anybody for it, apart from it not being an offense, and I will explain to you in 2 minutes why it is not an offense, apart from it not being a road traffic offense, it is a mere directory rule. In other words, the parliament or the minister, when at the time, 1983, 1984, I beg your pardon, when he made that rule, it was just a suggestion, an advice. It, and as we lawyers say, it was just directory. You're just directing the public for its own safety, for public in the public interest that windows not be too dark. But it does not become elevated. That prohibition does not become elevated to the status of an offense. It does not become a road traffic offense, or as we say, quasi criminal offense. Because anytime you can be in prison for a road traffic offense,
Mhm.
and you imprison people when they commit a criminal offense. That is how serious the Road Traffic Act is. So that the first point I make to laypersons and to my colleagues in the law is that that section is directory only, or to pronounce it differently, directory only. It is not mandatory. It does not mandate. It does not order. It does not enjoin you. It does not force you to have light windows. It merely directs you that your windows should be light. And if you breach that directory rule, nobody can stop you from using your car. And worse, nobody can charge you for anything because you have not committed an offense. Now, I will tell you why it is not an offense. And I suspect that after Thursday, the Prime Minister got this legal advice. It is not an
From
offense
you,
because
from you.
yes, I'm giving the I'm giving the advice. Now, for my legal friends and for the persons listening to this show, watching this show, Rule 21 says any person who uses, causes, or permits to be used on any road a motor vehicle in contravention of this part or otherwise fails to comply with this part is guilty of an offense. Now, some lay persons will come to me and say, well, look, the rule that you just read is a part of these regulations, and rule 21 is appearing to say, look, if you contravene anything here, you're
Mhm.
guilty of an offense. Now remember, I told you that it seems to me that it is directory only, and I feel justified in saying that, because police officers sometimes they stop you and say, well, your window's very dark, but they don't charge you. And I don't know if anybody has ever been charged for it, but I hope they have not been convicted for it, because it is not an offense. And I will tell you why it is not an offense. Now, the road traffic regulations describes it as an offense. I wonder if I should say this without charging for it. Um, in law, we talk about how an offense is created. And an offense is created only when it prescribes a penalty. In other words, when
Mm.
this section said it is an offense, it ought, in order for it to become an offense known to the law, in order for this language to be interpreted as an offense, a criminal or quasi criminal or road traffic offense, it must have gone on to state a penalty. In other words, it should have said it is an offense um, for which the penalty is $500
Mhm.
or 7 days in prison. That's the
Yes.
penalty. But unless statute prescribes a penalty, although it describes it as an offense, although it describes the act, the activity, the prohibition, the act against the prohibition, although it describes it as an offense, it is not, properly speaking, an offense for which you can charge a person in court unless it prescribes a penalty. Regulation 21 has not prescribed a penalty.
Right.
And
Wow.
having failed to prescribe a penalty, it has not created an offense that can be, for which you can be charged in a court. And you would have heard the Prime Minister say that she told her Attorney General she don't want to prosecute anybody. She just wants money. Now, I explain why that is also flawed. Because you can't fine a fella unless you prosecute him. On what authority? You can't walk around collecting fines. Uh, you can do that only if the law allows it, and that is a ticketing system. You have it all over the United States and Britain and Europe and so on. The wardens walk around for bad parking. We do it here in Barbados too. They put a ticket on your car for bad parking. You go over to the court and you pay the $50. We don't have ticketing for this dark windows business. So I want to say to the public tonight that dark windows, and this is not treason, to have dark windows on your vehicle is not an offense. It is not an offense for which you can be charged in court. Okay, I want to say that. That is my legal opinion. One may say it's only a legal opinion, but I feel strongly that I hold the correct legal opinion. And if it were not so, the Attorney General would have told you. But last night he clearly told you that the matter is being deferred so that they can work on the legislation. So perhaps they agree with me. He didn't go into any details as to why there's this delay, but they're going to fix it. They're going to try to fix it. At this point in time, Barbadians need not worry. Keep your car cool. You have not and you are not committing any offense that attracts punishment under the Road Traffic Act. Do you have any questions, Marcia, Ferdy?
Oh, oh my goodness. Was someone, go ahead, Dr. Ferdy, and then there's somebody who's saying that they had a friend who was fined 500. Cami would need to tell us how long ago was that? Was it this week? Did it happen on Saturday or when did it happen, Cami? But while we wait on that answer, go ahead. You have a question, Dr.
No,
Ferdinand,
I
related to this?
actually, what I wanted to make the comment relative to a couple of things, just
Mhm.
to pop back to leadership in terms of team. I just wanted to say there's no I in team, TEAM. There's no I, so it's always a group of persons. And then the second thing I wanted to mention, Ralph, this
Yes.
legislation relative to the Tintin, how does this treat two vehicles that are actually imported with the dark glass? It's not tinted, they're actually dark glasses on
Yes.
the back of, when you look at more of the high-end type vehicles. But of course, because of the changes that are occurring in the manufacturing sector of of the automotive industry, you're now
Mhm.
getting regular Toyotas and Nissans and Suzukis and so on coming with the tinted glass. Now, I remember, I don't know if you recall, at one time there was legislation, I don't know if it's still on the books, that you could not add additional lights to the vehicle, such as fog lamps that would cause,
Yes.
glare. But of course,
Mhm.
then a lot of vehicles started coming, which up to this day also happens with built-in fog lamps that
Mhm.
you simply cannot remove, and you can't
Mhm.
request of the manufacturer the removal of them. Similarly, it is the same thing with the dark glass. How does one
Yes.
engage that when the legislation actually is enacted?
Purdy, I love that question. And here, let us go back to the legislation then. The legislation, the legislation fixes responsibility on the owner. Yes, let us revisit it, Purdy. It
Hmm.
says the owner of the vehicle shall not permit the glass to be tinted,
Mm.
so that the legislation identifies the wrongdoer as the owner. Yes. So if the garage imports a car, sells it to Dr. Nichols, Dr. Nichols takes it on the street the next day. If the new legislation, and the Attorney General can hear me now, if the new legislation continues to fix the owner with responsibility for having applied the tint, you haven't applied the tint. If McInerney or Simpson, well, Inchcape now, they're called,
Yes.
if they import the vehicle and sell it to you as is, Dr. Nichols, the legislation cannot say that the owner permitted the glass to be tinted. You did not permit the glass to be tinted. And I don't know why you've asked me this question to give the government an idea now to amend this legislation to lock
Well, I
people.
don't know. I don't know amending the legislation is going to change anything, because I can assure you that none of the manufacturers of automobiles are going to make a change for Barbados. It's just simply not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that
Well,
is, but
yeah, but again, the legislation. Sorry to cross you, Ferdy.
no,
Again,
no,
the
no, that's fine. That's
legislation
fine.
targets the owner of the vehicle.
Owner.
Yeah. So if the owner, you buy it from McInerney, as is, you've done nothing to it. If the new legislation, which I expect to come, if the new legislation uh, blames the owner for, or identifies the owner as a wrongdoer, if he is responsible for the tint, we're back.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Good. Um, the owner, the person who buys it from the garage, all he has to do is say, "Look, I am the owner, but I'm not responsible for the tint," so that you cannot condemn or fine or prosecute. You can't prosecute a man if he is as is. Yeah, so that's the answer to the question, Ferdy.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Had a
Appreciate it
discussion
very
with a
much.
colleague today. Had a discussion with a colleague today, and we were looking at that. The question as to ownership is critical.
You'll soon come back, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably
Kima, in the
a
meantime,
internet
Kima, if
issue.
you have a question, read the Tintin and the law before we, Kima, you can think about one if you have one, and then once you
Yes,
come back on. I think that we're going to have Mr. Thorne. Dave, can you call him for me? And we're going to ask him to go out and to come back in,
Yeah.
because we really want people, please don't leave. I think this is so important because honestly, if he had not said anything, I didn't hear any other lawyer saying anything. If he had not said something about it, then the average Barbadian, like myself, would go over and say, "Oh my God, October 16th, we have to get this thing done." And we are so grateful that Mr. Thorne has said something. Now, what they're going to do, obviously, because he said something about it, and doing all of this education, and we know they listen, is that they are going to, between now and January, they're going to adjust the legislation to make it happen. But at least we had it there as a daddy or a big brother saying,
Ferdinand,
no, you can't touch that. Huh?
But you know,
I didn't hear
we
that.
can blame Dr. Nichols. You can blame Ferdinand Nichols because he asked the question and has forced him to give government advice as to how to draft the new legislation. But
Oh
right
my
now it
but
is
God.
the interesting thing though,
the owner.
Rob, is that that tint is not an added tint. That tint is an impregnated tint. It's actually the entire
Yes,
glass
yes, yes,
that is
yes,
tinted.
yes.
It's not the glass that's tinted. It's tinted glass. I don't know if you understand the difference.
I do,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm saying to you that the legislation uh, identifies wrongdoing in the owner of the vehicle.
Owner.
If the
Yes.
owner has of the vehicle says, "I haven't done anything to the tint. I bought this
right,
like
right,
this from the manufacturer from the garage," you cannot charge him because he has not been responsible for tinting the vehicle.
right, right.
Yeah,
And
Yes.
if
Yes.
they do, that would simply prohibit the importation of all vehicles to Barbados. Period.
precisely,
That would be
precisely,
and that would be
precisely,
nonsensical. Absolutely
precisely.
nonsensical.
I made the analogy with the camouflage clothing. Uh, Camouflage is prohibited, but I am not sure if they allow people to import it. I don't know. I don't know, but it would not make sense to prosecute a man for wearing camouflage while you allow the store to import it. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I
So
follow.
I
I'm
suspect they won't.
understanding.
Beg your pardon?
Yeah. No, I said I'm understanding. It's making sense. It's making sense what you're
Yes,
saying.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So if the car is imported like that, they can't touch you. They
No,
can't
no.
touch you because the
But
owner has done nothing.
as you had indicated, and Marcia mentioned, it's the whole sense of intimidation. Because a lot of people on the
Yes,
street are not aware of these things, and so when you hear the
yes,
prime minister make a proclamation such as she has made,
yes,
then you
yes,
have people rushing out trying to get their glasses, they tint off their glasses. But again, I
yes.
also place some of the responsibility on the garages and on the tinters who I consider to be complicit in it, because if they know the legislation, and to a large degree, then government may have to. Well, then I may be giving them advice. So I think I will not go any
Yeah.
further.
Yeah. Let's leave that there.
Yeah, for
But
just remember though, just remember that the manufacturer of the car is not subject to the laws of Barbados. So he
That's
doesn't,
correct.
when he manufactures that car, he's not he is not subject to these laws. So he can do anything he wants with the tin.
Yeah.
So when it gets here, if the owner does something to it, the legislation targets the owner,
owner. Yes, the
not the
owner.
person selling it, not the person borrowing the car, not the person hiring the car. It's the owner. And as
There was a
I
there was a
said, for you have led me into giving ideas to the new draftsman as to how he
Yes.
should approach.
well
Said one more. They
there's a
want
new
you to.
government. There's a new government coming, so it's not a problem.
Yeah. But
You
Kimar
can
is
say,
here, and I think Kimar might have a. Kimar, do you have a question? I couldn't hear you properly.
yes, Kumar.
Yes. Good night to you, Mr. Thorne. Um, Great to see you on the show.
Thank you, man.
Excellent.
Ralph.
Yes, yes. All right, Mr. Ralph Thorne. Yes. So
Stubborn fella.
I, so I listened to your intro quite keenly. Um,
Yes.
and your correction to the taint issue. I
Hmm.
wanted to link it to the statement that I want money, right?
Uh-huh.
Um,
Hmm.
that rhetoric uh, allows me to think that there may be a move to further monetize, let's say, uh, minor infractions, period, or I would say
Yes.
infractions with the law.
Yes.
right? Um, as a experienced lawyer, do you see dangers in statements like that? Uh, Given how you explained it in the first instance, where a prime minister does not have the power to do these things, but by
Yes.
just verbal directive, you turn up one day and say, "This is what I'm doing."
Yes. Thanks,
Yeah.
Kimar. You know, the greatest danger there is the, and I'm not being dramatic here. The greatest danger in all this is the specter of a police state. That, as I said, a prime minister has no business in the Road Traffic Act. First of all, the Road Traffic Act is supervised by the Minister of Transport, who I understand was at the press conference and said not a word. It is not the prime minister. It's not the prime minister's business, nor is it the business of any minister, including the Minister of Transport, to instruct the police, one, to charge. Because if you instruct the police to charge, you will possibly assume unto yourself the power to instruct the police as to who to charge. And that is where the danger begins. Then a partisan politician, a partisan prime minister, and a prime minister within our system obviously is partisan. And a prime minister cannot instruct the police, and this is the point I made on Saturday, the police or the director of public prosecutions in terms of prosecuting. That is when you have a police state, and a police state is an authoritarian state in which police powers are directed by politicians, and that is what you're trying to avoid, and that is the specter of what the prime minister is doing, that the prime minister is assuming powers to advise, to instruct, to counsel, to direct the police force. And that is the, Kimar, that is the greatest danger we are facing here.
That's
We can
correct.
remove ourselves from the Tint discussion. The mere fact that the prime minister believes that she has the power to, well, she said she don't want to prosecute anybody, but she wants money. So she is going into a legislative instrument. She's going into the road traffic regulations, and she's going to fine people. Again, a fine can be done only by a court. And under the constitutional law of this country, prime ministerial powers are, are separate from judicial powers. A prime minister has no power to impose fines. A prime minister has no power to influence the court. A prime minister has no power to influence the DPP because, as I said on Saturday, it is only the DPP, one human being in this country, that can initiate proceedings in court, criminal proceedings, or terminate those proceedings. That is not the business of a prime minister. And I'm not saying that because it sounds good. I am saying that because the prospect of that happening is a dangerous prospect for democracy. When a prime minister believes that she has the power to have people charged, even if she doesn't identify those people, the mere fact that you believe, that you have it in your mind, that you have the power to influence the police into charging people and then fining people. And as I said, who fines? A magistrate fines. That is off limits for prime minister. And I'm not saying that to be emotional. I'm saying that because it is a dangerous prospect. This is dangerous territory. If you can wake up tomorrow morning and believe that a prime minister has the power to influence the police in terms of charging people, to influence courts in terms of fining people, it's all over. We're living in a police state. And we've seen enough movies about police states to know how they function. Read Niemöller's poem, First They Came. They came for the Jews and I was not a Jew. They came for the
Yes,
trade unionists and I was not a trade unionist. And after they took away everybody,
they
then they
came for
came for
me.
me and there was nobody for me.
That's right.
Yeah. And that describes the authoritarian state. And we, Barbadians, we are on, if a prime minister believes that, it means that we are on the threshold of a police state. It means that we are on the threshold. We laughed a lot here tonight. We had light-hearted exchange. But let us take this seriously. That when a prime minister utters those statements, I want money and I want fines in relation to an act of parliament which can be dealt with only by the courts. If she believes that she can trespass on the area of fining people, taking monies from people, we're on the threshold of a police state. We're on the threshold of authoritarianism. And I said, I am not saying that to call big words. I am saying that to look, there's a YouTube video, and I beg the Prime Minister's pardon. I have not come here to attack the Prime Minister personally. But all I'm saying is that what the Prime Minister has said pertains dangerously for Barbados. If she does not realize it, I want her to come to a realization tonight that what she said last Thursday, it's not a joke. It is not a joke. When a prime minister believes that she has that power, that pertains dangerously against democracy in Barbados. And that is why we need to remind her that there's a constitution that speaks of separation of powers, that tells her that the business of the court is not the business of a prime minister. And that when the business of the courts become the business of a prime minister, it's all over. That people will not get fair trials. That when policing in this country, when the police discretion, because the police exercise the discretion as to who they will charge and when they will charge them. And if the police in this country must now believe that they're subject to the influence of a prime minister in terms of charging people, that is where you have an authoritarian state. That is where you have a police state. People must understand this. And if the prime minister treats this lightheartedly, I say to her in all sincerity tonight, please don't behave like that. Please don't think like that. This is a democracy. And a prime minister does not have those powers. I repeat what I said on Thursday. Under the Police Act of Barbados, Section 8, I've read it several times. In the superintendence of the police force, now called the service, the commissioner of police is accountable to the head of state.
State president.
The prime minister is not mentioned at all. Policing, operational policing in Barbados is the business of the commissioner and his high command. It is not the business of the prime minister. So when you hear prime minister and attorney general, in this case, prime minister, speaking so casually about fining people and you wanting money in relation to the Road Traffic Act, please take that seriously. That is a breach of constitution. That is a misunderstanding as to her constitutional power, as to her political power. It is a grievous misunderstanding as to prime ministerial powers, and we cannot have a prime minister behaving like this. And I am begging the prime minister to withdraw from that approach to governance. You don't have that power. And the people of Barbados must understand that a prime minister does not have that power. That these are dangerous times. When you begin to believe that, believing it is one thing, but when you begin to behave it, and we've heard a postponement from October to January. You know, we spoke lightheartedly about it, but the people in this country who were afraid of October now have to be afraid for January. And we have to hope that January never comes. And today it will be the Road Traffic Act. Which act will it be tomorrow?
Yeah.
Which police officer will be influenced to charge somebody for a different criminal offense? Which police officer will be influenced by a politician to charge somebody under any other act? That is the dangerous territory upon which government, upon which this government has trespassed. And we have, look, Marcia, I have so congratulated you. This is the only place in Barbados where I would have been allowed to say this liberally, freely, and over an hour and a half. The Marcia Week show.